For nearly 200 years, humanity had been the galaxy's greatest disappointment. At least, that was what everyone believed. Across thousands of star systems, the archives of the Galactic Council held an almost embarrassing record of human military history. Battle after battle, war after war. The outcome was always the same: human defeat. The records were painfully clear. Battle 1, loss. Battle 37, loss. Battle 102, loss. Battle 168, loss. Battle 200, loss. 2 full centuries of war, and humanity had not achieved a single decisive victory against the great powers of the galaxy. To the older civilizations, the conclusion seemed obvious. Humans were brave, but bravery alone did not win wars. In military academies across alien worlds, human tactics were studied not as inspiration, but as cautionary examples. Young commanders were shown human battle footage during training simulations. They learned how humans overextended supply lines, how their fleets retreated too late, how their commanders relied on emotional decision-making rather than calculated efficiency. Observe the human response pattern, instructors would say calmly. Resilience without strategic discipline. It became a phrase repeated across the galaxy. Resilient, but inferior. The truth was difficult to argue with. Human fleets always fought fiercely. They rarely surrendered. But when faced with overwhelming force, they withdrew. Territory changed hands. Trade routes were lost. Peace treaties were signed under unfavorable terms. Again and again. And yet, a few observers began noticing something strange. The defeats never looked like disasters. Human fleets suffered losses, yes, but never catastrophic ones. Entire armadas were never wiped out. Human command ships were rarely destroyed, and whenever they retreated, it was always at the last possible moment before total collapse. Almost as if they knew exactly when to leave. But most analysts dismiss the idea. Coincidence, luck, or perhaps simple stubbornness. After all, humans had always been known for their persistence. They lost, but they kept coming back. And strangely, every time the humans rebuilt their fleets, they seemed stronger. Their ships improved. Their technology advanced. Their infrastructure expanded deeper into space. Even after major defeats, human industrial output continued to rise. It was puzzling, but not alarming. After all, they still lost every battle that mattered. 200 years of consistent defeat was difficult to argue with. Eventually, the pattern became accepted as fact. Humanity would always remain a second-tier military power, dangerous in small engagements, but incapable of competing with the galaxy's dominant empires. And so the wars continued, until the announcement that would change everything. In the central chambers of the Galactic Council, a transmission spread across every member system. A new conflict had begun along the outer edges of human territory. A confrontation between humanity and the powerful Zereth Dominion. The Dominion was one of the most formidable forces in known space. Their fleets were massive, their tactics precise, their victories legendary. The outcome seemed obvious before the first shot was ever fired. Another human defeat, another entry in the long list of losses. Battle 201. Across the galaxy, analysts prepared their predictions. Historians prepared their reports. And commentators began discussing what lessons could be learned from humanity's next inevitable failure. But inside the Dominion's strategic command, something unexpected appeared on their tactical displays. Human fleets were not withdrawing. Not this time. They were holding position, waiting, calm, almost prepared. For the first time in 200 years, something about a human battle plan felt different, and no one yet understood why. For the Zereth Dominion, the war with humanity had become an irritation that had lasted far too long. Humans never truly threatened the Dominion's power. They never won decisive victories. They never pushed beyond their borders. But they also never stopped fighting. To the Dominion's high command, that persistence was beginning to look less like courage and more like stubborn inefficiency. So the Dominion decided it was time to end the matter permanently. Deep within the command halls of the Dominion's capital world, fleets were mobilized on a scale rarely seen in modern galactic history. Battleships the size of cities slid out of orbital docks. Carrier formations assembled around massive command vessels. Escort wings formed precise geometric patterns across the darkness of space. Their destination was a narrow stretch of interstellar territory known as the Helios Corridor. The corridor was one of humanity's most important trade arteries. Hundreds of civilian routes passed through it. Mining shipments flowed along its outer lanes. Energy convoys moved through its stabilized jump channels. But more importantly, the Dominion's intelligence believed something else about Helios. The human frontier fleet station there was isolated. Intercepted transmissions suggested the fleet had been operating with minimal reinforcements for months. Their supply lines were stretched. Their defensive infrastructure appeared limited. And according to Dominion analysts, nearby human fleets were too far away to arrive in time. From a strategic perspective, the opportunity looked perfect. Destroy the frontier fleet, seize the corridor, force humanity to accept a permanent territorial settlement. A clean victory. The Dominion's admirals approved the operation immediately. Across the galaxy, news of the coming battle spread quickly. The Galactic Council began broadcasting tactical previews and historical comparisons. Military analysts debated likely outcomes, but the predictions were nearly identical everywhere. Another human defeat. The Dominion was simply too powerful. Their fleet outnumbered the human defenders by more than 3-1. Their technology was superior. Their commanders had centuries of experience fighting major galactic conflicts. Against such force, human resistance would be symbolic at best. Even some human allies quietly expected the same result. And when the Dominion fleet finally entered the outer edge of the Helios Corridor, everything seemed to confirm the predictions. Human ships were already there, waiting. The frontier fleet held formation near the center of the corridor's main jump routes. Not hiding, not retreating, just present. Dominion sensors scanned the surrounding space. No large defensive networks appeared. No hidden shipyards. No planetary fortifications. Most importantly, no incoming human reinforcements. It looked exactly like the hundreds of human battles that had come before. A small fleet standing bravely in the path of a much larger one. Inside the Dominion flagship, Admiral Corvith Rell studied the tactical map. The display showed human formations arranged in a defensive arc. Their ships were steady, disciplined, but hopelessly outmatched. Corvith allowed himself a small smile. Predictable, he said quietly. Humanity had spent 200 years proving they did not understand galactic warfare. They fought with passion instead of calculation, with courage instead of efficiency. Soon the galaxy would see the final result of that mistake. The Dominion fleet accelerated deeper into the corridor. Thousands of warships moving in perfect synchronization, weapons charging, targeting systems aligning. The battle would begin within minutes. Across council space, millions of viewers watched the tactical feeds. Historians prepared to record Battle 201, another chapter in humanity's long history of defeat. But what none of them realized, what no Dominion sensor could detect, was that the Helios Corridor was no ordinary battlefield. Hidden throughout the vast stretch of space were systems so subtle they looked like natural phenomena. Silent structures buried within asteroid clusters. Gravitational manipulators drifting between jump lanes. Signal relays embedded inside debris fields. Invisible pieces of infrastructure placed carefully over the course of 2 centuries. All of it waiting for one moment. One fleet. One battle. The Dominion believed they were about to destroy humanity's frontier defense. They believed they were walking into an easy victory. But in truth, they were flying directly into the center of something humanity had been building for 200 years. And the trap had just closed. The first shots of Battle 201 were exactly what everyone expected. Dominion fleets advanced in disciplined waves, their massive formation spreading across the Helios Corridor like a moving wall of steel and light. Targeting systems locked onto the human frontier fleet. Weapon arrays powered up in synchronized patterns. Across the galaxy, analysts watching the live tactical broadcast nodded in quiet certainty. This would not take long. The human fleet, positioned near the corridor's central transit lane, appeared small by comparison. Their ships held a tight defensive formation, engines glowing softly against the darkness of space. Then the Dominion opened fire. Brilliant streaks of energy cut across the void, forcing the human fleet to maneuver. Several human ships broke formation to avoid the initial barrage, drifting slightly off their original positions. So far, it looked exactly like the previous 200 battles. Dominion fleets pressed forward with confidence. They expected the next step in the familiar pattern. Humans would resist briefly, then retreat. But minutes passed, and the retreat never came. Instead, the human fleet held its position. Inside the Dominion flagship, Admiral Corvith Rell frowned slightly as he watched the tactical display. "Curious," he muttered. Human commanders had always been quick to withdraw once a battle tilted against them. Their survival instinct had been consistent for 2 centuries. But now the fleet simply remained where it was, steady, unmoving, almost as if they were waiting for something. Corvith leaned toward the sensor officer, scanned the surrounding region again. The officer complied immediately. Moments later, the sensor board lit up with new data. "Admiral, we are detecting gravitational fluctuations across the corridor." Corvith frowned deeper. "Source: unknown." The distortions were small at first, barely noticeable, but as the Dominion fleet advanced deeper into the corridor, the readings began to increase. Navigation systems started adjusting automatically. Ships shifted slightly off course. Formations that had been perfectly aligned began drifting apart by tiny degrees. At first, the Dominion crews assumed it was a calibration issue. Then communications began experiencing delays. A half-second lag, then 1 full second, then 2. Orders that should have moved instantly across the fleet now took precious moments to propagate to the command network. Corvith's calm expression faded. "Report." The sensor officer spoke again, his voice tighter this time. "Multiple gravitational anomalies detected throughout the corridor. They appear artificial." That word changed everything. Artificial. The Dominion's tactical displays began mapping the distortions more clearly. The entire corridor was filled with them. Dozens, then hundreds. Massive gravitational wells carefully positioned between the Dominion formations. Some were pulling ships slightly off course. Others were interfering with hyperspace stabilization systems. And somewhere within the corridor, signal interference was growing stronger. Communications were becoming distorted. Navigation software was struggling to compensate. Ships that had entered the corridor in perfect order were now drifting into disorganized clusters. For the first time since the battle began, the Dominion fleet looked uncertain. Inside the flagship command chamber, Corvith stood slowly from his command chair. Full environmental scan. The results appeared across the main tactical display, and what they revealed made the entire command room fall silent. Hidden throughout the Helios corridor were thousands of structures, not large stations, not weapon platforms. Something far more subtle. Gravitational manipulators anchored inside asteroid clusters. Signal disruptors drifting between transit lanes. Navigation interference arrays embedded within debris fields. None of them had fired a single shot. They weren't weapons. They were control systems. The entire corridor had been transformed into a carefully engineered environment. Every gravitational fluctuation, every signal delay, every navigation disruption, all of it was being guided, managed, controlled. Corvith stared at the display as the realization slowly settled over him. The Dominion fleet had not entered a simple battle. They had entered a prepared environment. Across the battlefield, the human fleet remained exactly where it had been since the battle began, holding position, watching, waiting. For 200 years, every human battle had followed the same pattern: fight, hold briefly, then retreat. But now that pattern had broken. For the first time in 2 centuries, humans were not reacting to the battlefield. They were controlling it. Across the Helios corridor, confusion continued to ripple through the Dominion fleet. Ships struggled to maintain formation as navigation systems recalculated their paths again and again. Communications flickered with interference. Entire squadrons drifted slightly out of alignment. their precise military geometry dissolving into scattered clusters. It was not chaos, but it was no longer control. And in space warfare, control was everything. Inside the Dominion flagship, Admiral Corvith Rell stared at the tactical map in growing disbelief. For centuries, the Dominion had mastered the art of fleet warfare. Their formations were legendary for their precision. Yet here, in a single corridor space, their advantages were dissolving, and the human fleet still had not advanced. They simply waited. Then a signal appeared across Dominion communication channels. A direct transmission, unencrypted. Origin: Human Command Vessel, Frontier Fleet. The bridge crew looked toward Corvith. He hesitated only a moment. Open it. The main display shifted. A human officer appeared on screen. He sat calmly in the command chair of a sleek human flagship. Behind him, the quiet glow of tactical displays illuminated the bridge. No alarm, no urgency, just quiet control. Dominion Fleet, the man said evenly, "I am Admiral Marcus Hale, commanding officer of the Helios Frontier Defense." His voice carried no arrogance, no anger, only calm certainty. Corvith narrowed his eyes. "You are transmitting during active engagement," he replied. "Explain." Hale gave a small nod. "Of course." He leaned slightly forward. "There's something your strategists never considered." The Dominion command chamber remained silent. "For 200 years," Hale continued, "the galaxy has recorded humanity's military history as a sequence of defeats." He paused. Battle 1. Loss. A tactical marker appeared on the display. Battle 37. Loss. Another marker appeared. Battle 102. Battle 200. Corvith frowned. "We are well aware of your record." Hale's expression did not change. "Yes," he said calmly. "You are." Another image appeared on the Dominion display. This time it was not a battle. It was a chart, a web of data points stretching across centuries. Fleet movement patterns, communication networks, navigation algorithms. All of those battles, Hale said quietly, gave us something far more valuable than victory. Information. Corvith felt the first flicker of unease. Hale continued. "For 200 years, humanity studied how the galaxy fights wars. Your fleet formations, your communication systems, your navigation dependencies, your response patterns when battles shift. The data web expanded further. Thousands of battle records connected together. Every conflict humanity had fought, each one feeding into a single growing system. Every defeat gave us more data," Hale said. "Every engagement revealed another piece of how your civilizations wage war." Corvith's voice hardened. "You expect us to believe you spent 2 centuries losing intentionally?" Hale shook his head slightly. "No, we expected you to believe we were losing." The Dominion command chamber went silent. Hale gestured slightly, and the tactical display zoomed outward. The Helios corridor appeared again, but now thousands of hidden objects became visible. Tiny installations scattered across the entire region. Infrastructure previously invisible to Dominion sensors. "While you studied our defeats," Hale said, "we were building something." Images appeared of construction platforms hidden in asteroid belts. Automated fabrication systems assembling small orbital devices. Silent relay stations drifting through deep space. "Quietly," Hale continued, "humanity constructed infrastructure across our territory. Thousands of stations. Millions of automated systems. None of them weapons." Corvith stared at the screen. Then he understood. "They're environmental systems," he said slowly. Hale nodded. "Correct. Artificial gravity wells. Signal management arrays. Navigation manipulation systems. Battlefield control networks." Corvith felt a cold realization spreading through his thoughts. You turned space itself into a weapon. Hale shook his head again. "No, we turned space into terrain." He looked directly into the camera. "Your fleet believed it was entering a battle." The tactical map zoomed in on the Dominion formations drifting unevenly through the corridor. But the moment you cross into Helios corridor, you entered the largest strategic experiment in human history. The Dominion ships continued struggling to maintain formation. Communications lagged. Navigation systems recalculated constantly. Every movement required adjustment. Every maneuver slowed. Meanwhile, the human fleet remained perfectly stable, uninterrupted, unaffected. Hale spoke one final time. Battle 201 was never meant to be fought fairly. He paused. It was meant to prove the system works. And across the Helios corridor, the trap humanity had spent 200 years building was finally complete. The Helios corridor had become something no Dominion strategist had ever planned for, a battlefield they could not control. Dominion ships struggled against invisible forces shaping the space around them. Navigation systems constantly recalculated trajectories, trying to compensate for shifting gravitational fields. Fleet formations that had once moved with perfect synchronization were now scattered across the corridor. Communication delays worsened. Orders arrived too late. Commands overlapped. The Dominion fleet, once a flawless machine of war, was slowly unraveling. Inside the flagship, Admiral Corvith Rell studied the tactical map with quiet disbelief. They still possessed more ships, more weapons, more firepower, but none of it mattered. Their fleet could not maneuver properly. They could not coordinate. Every tactical advantage they possessed had been quietly removed. Meanwhile, the human fleet remained perfectly stable at the center of the corridor, unmoving, unthreatened, waiting. Then the Dominion communication channel activated again. Admiral Marcus Hale reappeared on the display. Corvith stared at him. "You could destroy us now," Corvith said bluntly. It was not a question. The human fleet had every advantage. The environment itself favored them. One coordinated strike could cripple the Dominion armada before it even regained formation. But Hale simply shook his head. That was never the objective. Corvith narrowed his eyes. Then why reveal this? Hale leaned back slightly in his chair. "For 200 years, he said calmly, humanity has allowed the galaxy to believe we were weak. Images appeared across the Dominion display again. Old battles, human retreats, fleet withdrawals, loss after loss recorded across centuries. We allowed those defeats to happen," Hale continued, "not because we lacked the ability to win, but because winning too early would have created a very different galaxy." Corvith remained silent. Hale explained. 200 years ago, the galaxy had been unstable. Young empires competing for power. Military alliances forming and collapsing. Civilizations testing each other's strength. If humanity had suddenly demonstrated overwhelming strategic superiority, the result would not have been peace. It would have been panic. The entire galaxy would have united against the unknown threat. So humanity chose patience. Instead of revealing their true capabilities, they observed, they learned, they built. Every defeat gave them more data. Every battle refined their understanding of galactic warfare. And slowly, quietly, they transformed their own territory into something entirely new, a region where humanity could shape the battlefield itself. Hale gestured toward the corridor around them. The Helios system is only one example. Corvith's expression hardened. "You've done this everywhere." Hale did not deny it. "For 2 centuries, we built infrastructure across human space. Gravity control networks, signal architecture, navigation management arrays, all designed for one purpose: to ensure that if war ever came to our territory, we would decide how that war unfolds." Corvith stared at the tactical map again. Then he asked a question that had been forming since the battle began. "So why show us now?" Hale's answer was simple. "Because the system is finished." Silence settled across the Dominion bridge. After a moment, Hale continued. "Battle 201 was never meant to destroy your fleet. It was meant to demonstrate something." The Dominion ships slowly regained partial stability as human systems reduced their interference, just enough to allow basic navigation again. "We could eliminate your fleet," Hale said calmly, "but that would only prove we can win a battle. What we needed to prove is that we control the battlefield." Corvith understood. This was not a victory. It was a message. Hale spoke one final time. Your fleet is free to leave. Return to your territory and inform the Galactic Council of what you witness here today. Corvith watched the human admiral carefully. What message should we give them? Hale's voice remained calm. Tell them humanity has no interest in ruling the galaxy. But if any empire chooses to fight inside human space, they will fight on human terms. The transmission ended. Slowly, the Dominion fleet began withdrawing from a Helios corridor. Across the galaxy, military observers replayed the battle recordings again and again, trying to understand what had happened, trying to understand what humanity had become. Years later, inside a quiet lecture hall at a Dominion War Academy, a young cadet raised a question during a lesson about Battle 201. If humans lost for 200 years, the cadet asked carefully, how long have they actually been able to win? The instructor studied the historical recordings for a long moment. Then he answered quietly, longer than we realized.